Good evening or good afternoon or whatever time of day it is for you future people that are watching this. I am Jim McClure. Of course, we are doing the 5th installment of the GM Academy Workshop. Today's topic is villains and finales. This is the ending, the big build-up, everything that you've ever wanted it to be in a story at the conclusion, and that is going to be our focus here today. It proves to be quite an interesting topic. We've kind of hinted around at it with a lot of the plot conversations in the other workshops, but this time we are really going to sink our teeth specifically into that finale of a story and the villains that go along with them, because they're very much intertwined together. So, real quick, I'm going to go around the table and talk to, of course, we have our panel as always following us live. They'll be here to ask questions, tell stories, everything like that. So we're going to start with some introductions, and the first one we'll get is Renegade. You're, of course, a regular here at the GM Academy. Give you a quick introduction.
Hey guys, I'm Renegade. So I've been GMing about a year and a half, and I run all sorts of games: Pathfinder, Star Wars. I used to run Warhammer, and I love GM Academy.
Wonderful, wonderful. And the next person we've got, of course, live here with us would be Toast.
Yellow. I'm Toast. I've been gaming over about 5 years, sort of actually playing about a year and a half, GMing about a year. Play Shadowrun, Pathfinder, Star Wars 3.5. That's about it.
All right,
GM Academy too.
don't kiss the host too much. And finally, we've got John.
My name is John. I've been playing and running games for 25 plus years. Yeah, I'm old. My favorite current systems are the playtest for the newest edition of Dungeons & Dragons 5e and 13th Edge.
Wonderful, John. Absolutely wonderful to have you aboard here. And I've got to say, for those who haven't checked it out, we actually did a play test of 5e and 5th edition D&D Next, whatever they're calling it. Wonderful system. Of course, you can check that out on our YouTube page. But we are getting here into this workshop. Like I said, of course, my name is Jim McClure. I will be our host for this workshop this evening. And as always, I am the only L5R player in the room. Legend of Five Rings, the greatest system, says this unbiased source. But we are getting into the wonderful fun here, and like I said, today's topic is finales and villains and how these two are very much intertwined, how to build each one, and we're going to be going through these things quite in depth with examples and the whole spiel. So the first thing that we're going to look at is finales themselves. And the finale, I mean, most people have a basic understanding what a finale is. It's what happens at the end of a story. But what is much more elusive is grasping how do you make a good finale? How do you make a memorable finale? So within our panel here, of course, everyone, we have quite a few experienced DMs. How about we get from Toast a story of one of perhaps the finales of your campaigns, if maybe you have finales within your campaigns, something interesting, something memorable from the group.
Okay, this is me as a player then. Haven't GM'd enough for that. Basically, the whole campaign was to get an awesome treasure. It was like Treasure Planet, but planes hopping. It was Treasure Plane. And we fought our way actually through hell. Not all the way through, just part of the way through. And then we came to this realm of gold, but we had to... Our final villain was the guardian of the realm, and he was literally a gold golem that could constantly regenerate because he was made of gold in a realm of gold. Basically, at that point, this is only halfway through the campaign, so it's a sort of a half finale. Basically, what we did is we just cheesed it to wherever our map told us to go, and the treasure was actually a ship that could travel to any dimension. That was the ultimate treasure on the treasure plane, and that's sort of where we left it for a moment.
Wonderful, and I'm so going to touch on, I love that idea of the gold golem. That's such a phenomenal one. We'll get one other quick story here. John, of course, you said you've been playing for 25 years. Hopefully, I imagine you have a finale somewhere within your DMing career, or perhaps the 25-year campaign has never come to an end.
No, I wish I would have been running a campaign for the entire 25 years. I would say the most epic finale I've ever done is it was like a 3-year-long campaign using the rule cyclopedia for Dungeons and Dragons, and it ended with actually a fight on a dragon, not against a dragon, but on a dragon. The dragon was so large, its shadow would, block out an entire city beneath it. And the player characters, it wasn't really. They did fight the dragon itself, but it was actually the cultists and the wizards and stuff, and that were kind of like had like a thing on top of the dragon, like a giant saddle, basically. There was also almost the size of a building, and the end result was this epic fight, and essentially getting the dragon to crash into a mountain because it was just so massive. It was more the dragon itself really wasn't the monster. It was more of like an environmental effect. I'd have to say that's the biggest.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you for the story, John. And sort of a couple things that I want to point out right from the beginning, and these two stories illustrated very well. And of course, everything that we're doing here in the GM Academy, and specifically this workshop, we are talking about, the GM's perspective and how to build one of these finales. And both of the stories that we heard, were wonderful finales, have stuck with you through the years of something great that happened. And we get to this core concept of what is a finale. And from a basic standpoint, yes, we know a finale is sort of the end event, the big climax, the biggest set piece for those who watch the How to Build a Plot series or the ongoing How to Build a Plot series. It's the biggest one, and it's great, and it's epic. But one of the core things when designing a finale that you should understand, and this will be reiterated many times over, a finale is an event, not an outcome. A finale is an event, not an outcome. When you are designing a finale, you are designing a fight on top of a dragon. You are designing a fight with a gold golem when you're searching for treasure. You are not designing the result of that. That is railroading. That's where you have issues. We'll get more in depth of that. But keep it in your mind throughout all of your planning. You are designing a big, major set piece as an event, not an outcome. I'll say it over and over again. So, with that thought in mind, we are building the big set piece, the big finale. How do we go about constructing this? And step one is you plan it from the beginning. Right from the get-go of your story, you need to understand what your finale is going to be. Now, this might sound like railroading. It may sound like you're pushing your players a certain direction, but ultimately it's really not that way. In the story of the Gold Golem that we heard, the PCs are going to look for treasure. We know what direction they're going to go. We know where the treasure is located. We know what's going to stand in the way of that treasure. You've built a finale. You've planned it from the beginning. You know exactly what's coming. That's planning a finale. That's understanding what's happened. The same thing with the fight with the big dragon. You might not have ever told your PCs you have to fight this dragon, but if you give a flying dragon the size of a mountain, they're not going to ignore him to go talk to the shopkeep. They're going to go interact with the dragon. They're going to interact with the most interesting thing. When you're building a finale, understand what's going to be the most interesting thing and organically lead your players to it. Make it the most interesting thing. Make it the biggest event of the story, and your players will automatically go to it, but understand what you're building to right from the get-go. Because if you just throw something in at the end, it's not nearly going to have the impact. That's where a lot of people miss it. It just feels like another play session with a bigger size monster, a monster with more hit die, what have you. If you build it from the beginning, the finale should be the conclusion of all of that. So everything that you're doing, each step by step, should build to this. So when you are thinking about designing a plot, when you're thinking specifically about designing a finale, understand right from the beginning you should have an idea of what it is. Will it change? Sure. Players will do different things. Players will mess up your plans, all of that. Wonderful. But understand and have a direction of what way you're going. Plan your finale from the beginning and build towards it. And when you do that, it allows you to design each step of the process to build up and escalate tension to a finale. This is the whole thing we talked about, the three or four acts of a plot. You're building tension. We are going to have a fight with a big dragon. So way back at the beginning, the first play session, the first hour, when they're walking down the path and they come across a giant dragon scale the size of the cart that they're driving in, you're building up to that finale. You're giving them the first couple clues of what's to come during this campaign. And the more you can incorporate that within the story, the better. If you do the giant dragon scale from that situation, hey, make it even bigger than the size of a cart. Make it the size of a town block and have your first encounter. Fight it on that dragon scale. It gives that grand size. It gives that grand epicness. It ties it from the beginning. And then when they're flying on that dragon, they're going to remember what happened each step of the way. Build that tension. Add pieces at every level, understanding what direction you are going to a finale. That's what makes it a finale. That's what makes it more than just another encounter, just another set piece. It's everything that's happened in sequence builds up and culminates in this one beautiful event, a finale. And if you can't tell, I'm a fan of finales. Big fan of them. Why? Because if you look at the 8 types of players, the number one type of fun that I enjoy is what? Narrative. This is very narrative focused. A finale is very important for narrative players, and most people just in general enjoy them. But it's a real big key that a lot of people miss. They just want a finale to happen organically, but you have to understand a finale is something that is built and constructed to make it happen. So, as you're adding tension to the plot, you need to, as you're planning this out, what I do is I sit down and I go, what events need to occur to make my finale work? So, if we have the dragon situation, we'll sort of be using these 2 stories throughout because they're just those wonderful, perfect little stories. The dragon story, if I want to have my characters fighting on top of a giant, mountain-sized dragon flying through the sky, what events do I need to occur to make that happen? I need to then to understand the size, the scope, and the power of this dragon, and I want to make it early. Again, the dragon scale, the skull of its kid that was killed, that is the gate to the city. Whatever that you have, you want to make sure that you are building up from the beginning. I want them to understand the size of this beast, the power of this beast. I want them to have that. The next thing is they have to have a reason to want to fight or to kill this thing, if that's what I'm going for. They have to have a reason that they are on or timid or whatever the case may be, whatever I'm going for. They need to have agency to interact with this. Now, again, with a mountain-sized dragon, most players are just going to go, ooh, mountain-sized dragon, let's go play with that, because it's the most interesting thing. But within other stories and more political style stories, which we'll talk about, especially when we get into the villain side of it, you want to be able to build them directly to, they need to want to interact with this. So in our dragon story, they need to want to engage with the dragon. And again, the earlier you're setting this stuff up, the better it is. The more it'll be engaging, the better the payoff will be. Finally, you need that final push. That final push that puts them into the finale itself. What makes them get on top of that dragon to make your scene happen? How are they going to get there? Are they going to be chasing a bad guy that has information? Is he going to be buried underneath the town itself? Understand what you have, because once you look at each of these things, I want to have an epic dragon fight. Okay, I need to establish his size and his power right from the beginning. Well, that gives me my first play session as we have the giant, the fight on the back of the giant dragon scales. They walk through the mouth of its dead kind. Then I want them to engage with the dragon. I want them to tell the stories about the dragon, either it's a loot or it killed the PC's father or whatever the backstory that I want to tie into. I want to give them agency to interact with this dragon, and then I want to lead them to where it is to get to that set piece. And ultimately, with all of this, you'll see, I'm not leading them by saying, you've got to go fight a dragon. I'm leading them by understanding the plot that I've created, the direction the characters will go, to give them the most exciting event possible. Flying on the back of a dragon through the sky and eventually ramming it into a mountain to kill it. Amazing event that's remembered. You want to lead people in that direction. So, each step of the way, establish what you're building and build a sense of agency. At each step, it should be we've got to get this resolved, we've got to get this resolved, we've got to get this resolved. And as it builds all the way up, once you get to the end, you have a wonderful event, and it's fantastic. One of the big things, I made comment that and I said, of course, we'll repeat this over and over again, a finale is an event, not a choice. I'm sorry, a finale is an event, not a result. The result needs to be determined by the PCs. Result is determined by the PCs. They need to know that they influence the world, that they are the ones that determined what happened with that finale. You know, I told the story in one of the other workshops of a game that a GM was running, that everything was running perfectly fine. The characters were engaged. They loved it. They had the finale event. It was a war between two towns. And then the PCs were just kind of meh, I guess. That was okay. And the reason being is because the ending result, the PCs had no choice in. The one side was going to win no matter what. They had no input in the outcome. And if there's no input in the outcome, it's not a finale. Not in tabletop. That's what they're looking for. That's the biggest payoff, them getting to influence the world. That is the biggest possible payoff, all those P's, that you can give your PCs. Give them that influence. So when designing your finale, when getting the big mammoth-sized dragon, or when fighting the gold golem, there needs to be a result, and there needs to be influence that the PCs ultimately exert over the world. They'll either kill the dragon or they won't kill the dragon, or they'll stop it in time or they won't stop it in time, or they'll tame the dragon or their villain will tame the dragon. There needs to be, not necessarily a pass-fail, but there has to be something for them to influence. If there's nothing for them to influence, they will not enjoy the finale. It will not give that sense of payoff. So, those are the couple things to understand when you are building up to the finale. That's the step-by-step process, what you want to do to really get involved with it. Let me ask Renegade, of course, one of our other ones that are here on the line with us, you know, when you've done finales in the past, have you ever done a conscious build-up to it like this, or what have you done in the past?
Yes, I have, and I know exactly what you're describing, and it is a very, very effective technique. I had recently a very great finale that I pulled off. The story is this: the players, they were exploring, and they walked into a city, and it was their goal to basically take over this city. And the way they went about that, they had to scout the city. They had to find, for example, what were its defenses? Who was defending this city? They had to find who was leading the city. How do we prevent the king of this city from being able to defend from the army, which we have and is coming and is marching here? How do we keep our army hidden? How do we have to take out the major people in the city, like the sheriff, who can possibly stop us? Or we have to take out the armory in the city because that will weaken the city's militia when our army comes. And then the finale was when that army arrived, and they had done everything. They had scouted, they had met the king, they had prepared for this army to come, and then there's a giant battle. The finale, the battle for the city, and they got to control everybody, every one of their troops, and they got to control that, and they got to see how they conquered it, and so it was very effective, I thought.
Wonderful, outstanding story, Renegade. And actually, when we get into examples, I have an example that's relatively close to that, so it'll sort of be interesting to see it play out here. But thank you for the story. Yeah, within your finale itself, and he hit on the points, and our other two stories, very much hit on it. A finale needs to be the biggest thing that happens in the story within a story arc, and again, look back to plot, 15 to 20 hours in my opinion. But it needs to be the biggest event that happens. If you have the big, huge, riding a dragon through the sky, killing the gold golem, fighting the army, and then you want to set up the fight with the villain after that, a one-on-one battle with a villain on flat ground in the middle of the town is never going to compare to flying on a mountain-sized dragon. And it seems like an obvious point, but a lot of people miss that. In your mind, you want to go, what's the biggest thing that can happen in this story? Within reason. I mean, you don't go crazy with it, but within the context of my story, what's the biggest event to happen? That needs to be the end. Because if something big happens and then you come down off of that, then you're just going to have a lower payoff and degrade what it had already done. Yeah, you can have what's called a prologue event, where sort of things resolve after that, but A finale should resolve conflict, and it should be the biggest of all of the conflicts. And it really should tie into the villain, which again we'll get into sort of part 2 of this. One of the other big things to understand when you're building up finales is, and this is a concept that a lot of people unfortunately try to do, especially when they don't understand how to build a finale, and that is they try to achieve epicness through repeating things over and over, through repetition. Epicness through repetition does not work. And what I mean by that is a lot of people who don't understand how to build up a villain and how to build up a finale will just, mention the BBEG, the big bad evil guy, your villain. They'll have, the townsperson will mention, oh, this guy's so bad he killed 80 people. Oh, the next townsperson in the next place agent. Oh, he's so bad he kicked all of those puppies down at the orphanage. And they will just continue to mention somebody without actually building him up, thinking that's accomplishing something. Or they'll just have him fight the big bad guy multiple times until the final battle where they could actually kill him. Doesn't do anything. Repetition does not build epicness. Events build epicness. Events build towards a finale. They have to do something. The big bad evil guy sitting on his throne with his big axe and a full suit of armor for the whole campaign, yeah, he looks intimidating, but if we just keep seeing posters of the guy in town, we only care so much. I don't care about that I heard he kicked puppies. I want to see him kick puppies. I don't feel bad for that dog until I can look at the dog's face and go, aw, you got kicked. Sorry, puppy. I'm going to go kill that man. Who's a good boy? You have to give action. You have to demonstrate it. If we want to demonstrate, I talked about of course the dragon, one of our stories. If we want to demonstrate how well, how large this dragon is, how big this dragon is, again, we don't just go, it was so big it blotted out the sun. I mean, John obviously explained it that way to be brief for my benefit. But if we want to establish that, we show it within the world. That's why I said the dragon scale. That's something that we can directly interact with. We can directly see it. We can play around with it. We can touch it. Within the fake world, we can touch it. It's an event. It happened. We feel how big it is, and it adds to the weight. You get epicness through repeated events that build up to it. So epicness does not come through repetition. The finale should release all of this wonderful built-up tension that you have. You should continually and actively be building each step of the way. More stuff's happening, more stuff's going crazy, more stuff's going crazy. The combat's getting heavier, the plot's resolving. It should just all feel built up, and then the finale should be the conclusion of it all. It should release all of this tension. It should throw them in the middle of the chaos. It should allow them to resolve the chaos however they want and build it up that way. It needs to give that release. That release gives them the sense of accomplishment, the sense of story arc coming to conclusion. It's such a big thing to avoid player fatigue. You need to be able to provide them that. If you can get that tension that builds up and then release through a finale, people will absolutely love, remember, and talk about that finale forever, even if they can't pinpoint exactly why this fight with this dragon was so much better than that fight with that dragon in another campaign. And it's because of how you influence their emotions within the environment of the talk itself. So it should release all that build-up tension. One of the other real big things, and of course you all know me at this point, you've seen enough of my videos, you've heard me talk of the 8 kinds of fun, and it seems we won't get a video without discussing that. Within a finale, I always try and achieve 7 of the 8 kinds of fun. Submission, again, the enjoyment from just doing something that takes very little mental stimulus is completely at odds with finale and conclusion. So I don't try and achieve submission. That'd be detrimental. But all other 7 kinds of fun, I try and achieve. I only play music during my finales. I want that sensation, that extra feel, that something bigger is going on than what's normally happening. I want the conclusion narrative, the story arc. I want them to feel so sucked into this world that they engage in their fantasy. They get to do their expression. Something within their character needs to be resolved in this finale as well. I try and go through that checklist of the 7 kinds of fun and go, how is this one event going to engage all 7? Because the more of those that you can engage from players, the more they will enjoy and remember it. Again, a lot of times people don't even understand why this one fight with the gold golem and getting the ship full of treasure, why was that so much better than some of the others? And it's probably a lot of these things that people don't realize. It was engaging more types of fun. It had the proper build-up. Even though the event itself was large and engaging and good, there was just something special about it. Well, the reality is that something special comes from proper build-up, proper execution, and engaging types of fun. There you go. There's the keys to the kingdom. That's the whole enchilada of how you make people enjoy and how you take them to a higher level of enjoyment. Proper planning, proper execution, the 8 kinds of fun. I'm done here. No more workshops, right? That's it? We've got it all? But seriously, that is the true way to engage fun, to engage memories, to build a finale, to make people want the next story arc, to make your players beg you for the next play session. Engage those types of fun. And within a finale, I try and engage 7 of the 8. Another big thing that I like to add within a finale is you need to add information. You need to add information to the what has happened in the story so far. If you build up to the fight with the gold golem, there needs to be, and I hesitate to use this word, twist, but you need a little bit of a twist to get a little extra information, because if you go into the finale with all of the pieces, the players have put it together, we're going into this final battle, and we kill them and we get it, yay, it's good, and we engage a bunch of kinds of fun, but the one kind of fun that we're missing is discovery. They need to find a new piece of something. And I like to add a little bit of information, whether it be the villains' plots and schemes, the final piece that comes into play, whether it be a new environment that they go to that people didn't realize was a key to the whole thing. Give them something. And again, it could be a twist that changes their perspective of everything that happened before then, and we're not going to get too much into twists because that's its own whole topic. But within a finale, you always want to think it's everything that's happened to before plus one more thing. Give them that one extra piece of information to finish that engagement, to get it all, and to really hook them with the story of, that's it, that makes sense, oh, that's perfect. Just give them that one extra piece of information. And we had a question here from Melfane real quick. He says, please explain how you avoid making the following session feel like a new game. And this really goes into restarting it, and honestly I'll say it's a really good question. I don't necessarily have that problem, because if you go back, I'm not going to touch too much on it because it's more related to plot than finale, but if you build your wild card correctly, that 7th force within your structure of forces, and again, go back and watch the first plot videos, you know what I'm talking about. If you do that correctly, then within a finale, you have threads that go out into the next story. And while everything that's happened feels like a conclusion, they move on to the next story, and they have tie-ins to the next story, and it's using that wild card correctly, which is actually one on the list of that will be an entire workshop. So, Melfi, to answer your question, it is an hour-long discussion in and of itself to answer your question, but there is an art to it, and the basic art to it is allow plot threads to run through multiple stories. So, having said that, what happens when you get all of this together and you do it all correctly is you give that sense of reward to players. And I've had this conversation with several GMs over the years of how do I reward players at the end of campaigns? Do I give them treasure? Do I give them higher level magic items? Do I give them extra experience? Sure. You can give them all of that, but I've never once been able to reward a player more than engaging them to the point of, I cannot wait for the next story. I cannot wait for what happens next in this story. That is the true reward. And you get that reward by doing a finale correctly, by giving them a build-up, by giving them a payoff. You are mentally teaching them, if I engage in the next story, in 15 to 20 hours of playtime, I'm going to get another incredible experience. And that's going to take me through to the next one, and the one after that, and the one after that, until you have a 20-year running campaign. That's how you truly engage it. That's how you truly reward players. That's how you prevent player fatigue. Give them finales. Build your next story. Give them a finale. Build your next story, and you can tie one to the other. Exactly Melfane's question. Again, it's a bigger topic to do it, but you'll ultimately want to tie one into the next. But if you don't give them those finales, then they're eventually just going to get bored with the story. And it's especially prevalent with sandbox campaigns. It's, I want to give them the world, I want to give them the whole, the whole enchilada, let them run, do what they want, but eventually they burn out because they're not getting that reward. They need a reward for playing, especially your narrative people, especially your expression people, your discovery players. You need that reward for all of this. So we are actually going to go into, from the various internet forums that exist in the world, crazy place, that internet, where I'm going to pull up a couple examples of people talking about their plots in forums, and we're going to kind of dissect these just a little bit. And again, we're specifically more looking at finale than story, but I want to point out a couple things from some real-life examples. So I'm going to read off our first example here, and this was a posting again in an internet forum, and this DM said, I'm thinking of writing a story in the Firefly universe, but I want to mix it up a bit. So I'm thinking of making a little Deadlandish with Reavers and also bringing in Cthulhu. Right now, the idea is that the crew is asked to go defend the farm of an old friend of one of the PCs, kind of similar to the Firefly episode Heart of Gold. The players receive a distress call from either the friend at the farm or from someone in the nearby town. They go in under the belief that they will be facing bandits, but in fact will be facing smart Reavers. They fight off an attack or two, but then the plot reaches its climax when the Reavers turn out to be the cult of Cthulhu and summon him forth. At which point, the only choice for the players, get out, take their friends with them, and hopefully keep their sanity along the way. The players themselves will start the game just thinking it's a regular old Firefly story. So this is example one, and this DM has certainly done things right. He has planned from the beginning. He knows what direction he's going to take his story. Again, you can talk about mashing up genres all you want, but if that's what he wants to run, it's fine. There is one major issue with this story, and I will almost guarantee his players will not be happy at the end. He's going to think it's because of the swerve at the end of it actually being the cult of Cthulhu. It's not that. It's they have no choice. Cthulhu will be summoned. They will be required to run. They accomplished nothing. They did not change the world. No matter what, if they didn't show up, he got summoned. If they showed up, he got summoned, and all they could do is flee. They had no choice to make. There is nothing that they could do. And that's an issue. He's done everything else right. He built up to a good plot. I like the story. I'd be engaged in that story. And right at the end, I would go, well, okay, all we could do is run. I guess we'll get together next week. Real-life example of building everything out right, but having the problem of they don't have choice in the finale. We're going to example number 2 here. The party meets a charismatic loan shark who's just struck gold, literally. He's got the debt of a baron who is such a fool that he can't muster enough gold to pay his debts even when he owns a gold mine. Word is most of his miners up and left a few months ago. Rumors abound as to why. And the baron spent the time since drinking and gambling away his every last coin, putting him in great debt to the loan shark. This has put the loan shark in a unique position of being able to usurp a baronry for himself and have it all be totally legal. All he needs is some muscle to make sure the transfer of ownership goes smoothly. A few soldiers remain loyal to the baron. That's where the party comes in. The loan shark offers the party steady work on the baronry once it becomes his. He knows plenty of beggars in the next town over that will happily go to work in the mine for him once he takes command. Once the party takes the mine, they will learn that the real reason the Baron couldn't pay his debts. Just before the Baron started having his money troubles, a few miners went missing down in the deep tunnels. They were just workers, so it wasn't like anyone important would miss them. Work continued as usual. A few days later, however, they came back, they attacked the first group of men they saw and dragged him alive back into the deep tunnels. At that point, the remaining workers were too afraid to go back into the mines and abandoned their posts entirely. Making matters worse, the Baron has an older brother who is much more powerful lord. While there's currently little love between the brothers, the older one cannot have some low Baron scum usurping family land. He's on his way down with an army to kick the party out of the new home. So the party has to go into the mines, figure out what the heck is happening down there, choose who to side with, and ultimately how to deal with the other brother's army that is marching down on them. This, to me, I think there's a couple plot holes in it, is exactly how you build a finale. We have story from the beginning. You are going to take back this mine because this person owes me money. You have discovery. They get there. They learn that he's penniless because the people stopped mining. They learn that miners started disappearing. They go in and find out that something nefarious has happened, all with the backdrop that an army is going to be marching down on them. So they have that sense of agency. Every session, the army gets closer. They're building more and more tension. There's something nasty down in the mines, and they've got to do something with it, and they ultimately have to decide what to do with the town itself. It gives them a bunch of choices. They can side with the brother. They can flee for their lives. They can raise an army themselves and try to fight. They could go down in the tunnels and see what can do there. They could try and put the two together. It builds up to a natural climax between forces without a determined outcome. And when building a finale, that's exactly what you want. So, with those two examples, we are going to get going into villains next, but I did want to open it up in case there are any questions at this point so far on finales before we get into villains. So, did anyone have any questions real quick so far on anything we talked about?
Yes. So, I also like that example of building up the finale by, oh, there's an army that is marching, and that kind of gives you a natural climax when it arrives. Then there's the other thing about a giant monster that is terrorizing the town, and finally facing off with that gives you a natural climax when you face off with it. Are there any other tools similar to those two?
Yes, and I'm so glad you asked that. And to the answer is, I believe part of establishing a good finale is having a villain that the PCs hate, love, what have you, want to engage with. And the last section of what we're going to talk about today is example villains that I have. So to answer your question, yes, the last 10 minutes of this workshop, we're going to give you quite a few examples for things to build up and prepare for, and specifically villain topics. So with that, then we are going to jump right in here to villains themselves. Now, villains or antagonists are what's on the opposite spectrum of your protagonists, your players. They need to be in direct conflict, and again, all this is covered in the plot ceremony or the plot workshop. Direct conflict with what's going on with the PCs. We need to have that conflict there, but we get into how do we design a villain to have this kind of conflict. I'm going to state right from the beginning, there is two different roads, really, when we're talking about villains. One is an actual villain, or an antagonist, and one is an ending event, and not actually a villain. So to give the examples of that, a scheming politician is a villain. An unintelligent dragon that sits in a cave and guards treasure is an event. You need to know which of these two you're planning your finale towards. Either one can work, but they're built up differently. We're going to specifically talk about villains because that is almost each have their own merits, really. I can't say that one's better than the other, but most people use villains. You're going to get better player engagement from a villain. There is absolutely nothing wrong with using an event-style ending of, slaying the dragon to get his gold, but there's generally a lot less player thought process behind it, especially if you want to run a campaign with moral choices or anything of that nature. So understand right from the get-go which of the two you're kind of really talking about, and we're going specifically towards one right now, which is our villains. To have a villain, you have to have proper motivation. They need to have a goal, an objective, and a plan, just like the PCs do. And I'm going to tell you right now, taking over the world, destroying the town, killing everyone around them is not a motivation. That's an event. That is a force of nature. Here is this wild being that is going and destroying everything. That's an event. Again, you can use it, but it's not a villain, and PCs will not treat it as a villain. A proper villain has motivations. They have things they love. They have things they hate. They are, motivated. They have emotions. These are people. You want to build them like people. Again, to pull back the curtain on my personal GM style, Every single villain I make is a character I want to play as a PC. That's what I do. I make a PC I want to play and then make his motivations at odds with players. And we'll get into more to exactly how, again, sort of at the end. But to have a true villain that the PCs will sympathize with, will antagonize with, that they will hate each other, they will build up, they have to have their own unique motivations. And you, as the GM, need to be very familiar with those motivations. Now, so once you understand what the motivations are, that will really help to fully flesh out the character. You know, you want a villain to be a very fleshed out character. You know, again, maybe they don't kick the dog, maybe they kick cats because they love dogs, and he always has his dog with him, and he'll have to fight the dog in the end. You want to have all of these things fleshed out as much as you can. Again, just like if you were making a PC, flush your villains out the exact same way. They should be actively trying to achieve their goals throughout the plot. This is really important. They should not be sitting down in a cave doing a ritual for 4 play sessions while the PCs mill about. There is no direct interaction. They need to interact with what's going on. We should see the villain or his agents or his actions throughout each step of the story. We talked about building the finale, that each step of the way should build up to it. Each step of the way we should build up. If you've got cultists that are going to sacrifice to make the big ritual happen, and that's your villain, we need to see him in town square recruiting people to go on a quest that never return. We need to see torn robes and dead bodies in a grave pit somewhere where they've tossed the tributes that have failed. We need to physically see and interact with that. Hearing about it is not enough. And each of your set pieces throughout the story should be these various actions the villain's doing to make his plan. Again, look at what your villain plans to do, and look at. I go. What's the logistics of summoning Cthulhu? All right, I'm a cultist. All right, I need 6 other cultists. I got to get a certain number of bodies. I got to chant for a certain period of time, and the room has to look mystical. So, what is my checklist if I walk into town to make these things happen? I've got to recruit cultists. I've got to get bodies. Make these the events of the story. That will give you the step-by-step build-up. It will make you hate the villain. The charismatic villain who's standing up top, recruiting people to go on this epic quest to save the town, who are actually just going underground to be sacrificed to Cthulhu. That gives you your tie-in. That makes players hate the villain. They're getting to interact with what they're actually doing. And, of course, the twirling mustache always works as well. So, actively trying to do something. One of the other big things sort of to tie in with this, and it's really important to note because a lot of people don't get this, people care what someone is doing, not what they are. And this is a lesson for characters. This is a lesson for villains. They care what a character is doing, not what the character is or was. And what I mean by this, and we see it a lot, honestly, with players, but we see it with villains just as much, is if a character, PCs, I'm going to start with a PC example, they roll up the brooding assassin that sits in the corner of the room, and you know he has his Altair spikes, and he sits there, and when something happens, he pops up on the table, and he's all badass. And he has this whole backstory about, you know, he came from this town, and he's dark and brooding because he doesn't trust anybody, yada, yada, yada. Everyone's had that story. Probably most people around who's been around long enough have played that character probably early in their career. I know I'm guilty of it myself. And what happens is you're obsessed with what that character is. That character is a brooding assassin. It's a great character. No. What we care about is what your character does. What everyone cares about. What you yourself care about is what your character does. You believe from stories that you've watched and from video games you've played and other tabletop experiences that, oh, look how cool that person was. If you actually go back and re-experience the story, whether it be a book, a movie, a video game, what have you, you will notice what actually engages you is what they are doing. That's what engages you. They need to be active. So on the villain role, if there is the big giant, he's a 8'6" tall human being with a giant club that's the size of a door that he just can smack people around with. If he just stands there in his full black plate armor, no one cares. You may think that they care, that they should care. Look at him. He's got to have a strength of 26, for God's sake. No one cares. The second he takes that hammer and hits a peasant and he flies through the front glass window, they care because he did something. And it is a very important distinction. We care what villains and PCs do, not what they are. Sitting around looking badass does nothing. And players do not care and will not respond to it. They have to take action. So, one of the big points. And of course, the other one we touched on this a little bit earlier, the villain's desires need to conflict with the players. There needs to be a direct, both sides cannot achieve victory. Now, I mentioned one of the other workshops, this is one of the things, I hate the term quest, and a lot of people use quest. The reason people use quest is because it's an easy setup. PC is sent to get artifact A, and villain also wants artifact A. Only one side can have artifact A. We have natural conflict, and artifact A is worth money. We have desire to get it, we have an adventure to go through, we have events that have to happen beforehand, and we have conflict with a villain. It is the easiest put together story. Part of the reason why I hate it is because it's the easiest to put together story. But it does illustrate the point of direct conflict. There are numerous other ways to achieve this direct conflict. I'll tell you a story. I did this in one of my campaigns. It was the PCs were tasked with getting some secret information from one town to another. The information was actually an item that's kind of complicated. Again, Legend of the Five Rings, wonderful system. But what happened was the villain of the story was actively trying to stop them. They didn't know why. They suspected that it had to do with that information. But in reality, what was going on is the villain's the one who had set up the massive blockade because of lack of taxes that he had paid and had essentially sent out an entire false story to the rest of the kingdom and had locked down his sector of the world. And for the PCs to escape that broke what he was going for. Direct conflict. PCs have to get out. Villain has to keep them in, even though the villain is actually not interested in their information at all. And, of course, again, it was a more political thing, so we have all the political intrigue of his motivations and their motivations. But understand what you're trying to establish is a reason that the two have opposite motivations. The PCs and the villains need to have direct conflicting results that only one side can achieve in the end. And that is how you get your conflict. That's how you get your story, and everything else builds up right through that. Couple other things, then we'll jump into some examples here. The villain's action should be seen directly and indirectly through the campaign. Of course, we talked about that a little bit. We need to see what the villain's doing. If the villain's plans, is to summon Cthulhu and everything happens downstairs in the dark basement, the PCs haven't engaged with anything. All of these engagements shouldn't be random happenstance. They shouldn't be random encounters. These should be things that the villain is actively doing to build up that level of tension. One last really big point before we get into examples, and this is key. This pops up so much and I don't know why. If the PCs encounter someone that they know is a villain, they are going to attack him. Period, where the sentence ends. I want to make this incredibly clear. If the PCs know someone is their villain and they are face-to-face with them, they will try and attack them. It doesn't matter how much you try and tell them the villain is 20 levels higher or it's an elder dragon in your level 2. The PCs will try and interact with them, and most of the time through what is commonly played, that is combat. You have to understand this. This is not something, there are very, very few select times you can get away with that not happening, but they will try and attack them. So it leaves you the option. Either keep distance between the two or not reveal who the villain is if you want villain to PC early interaction. Understand, when the PCs know who the villain is and they have a line of sight he's here, they're going to go take him out, or they're going to try and take him out. And everything you said about how badass he is, how much power he has, none of that matters because you've been trying to build them up to a finale in a fight. They want to have that finale in the fight, and they don't know when it's coming. Understand that. It's a key aspect. Never, ever, ever try to do the, here's the big badass villain that you're not powerful enough to fight. Tremble in fear. The example that we had, Cthulhu summoned, your only choice is to run. Do not do that. That is one of the few things I will say is a poor way to GM. I've done it myself. Very first campaign I ever GM'd, I did it. I threw a level 25 character at the level 2s because it was, you're supposed to run from them. And it failed horribly. They almost always do. Do not do it. Cannot recommend it more against it. So with that, we're going to get into some types of antagonists that I came up with. And these are some that I've used in campaigns and otherwise. Some of them are a little bit different. One of the things I like to talk about, again, there is the non-intelligent villain, as I call it, which is, this is the event, the beast of burden, as it will, the unintelligent dragon, the behemoth that marches into town and kills. The brute, if you will. That villain is not someone that they're going to have an emotional connection with. Yes, you can tie it into the story. You can do a build-up. You can have a great finale with it. But understand, there is not an emotional connection. There is not a level of drama. There's not that.
Uh-oh.
Understand the difference of the two. Something wrong?
Oh, we had a quick freeze. I didn't know if that was just me. Continue.
Okay. Sorry about that. Hopefully everyone can still hear me. So, getting into the various types of game or villain, a couple that I've come up with that I'd like to use in the past. One is what I call the Glass King. A Glass King is a villain that is incredibly powerful, that the townspeople fear or respect him, but is physically very weak. The players could easily kill this person. He's the most powerful person, wields the most influence in the game, but is physically weak. And what this does is it makes an interesting dynamic of, if the PCs could ever get close to him and choose to, they could kill him. And what it makes the dynamic is, do you want to kill him? Do we want to then try and influence him? Do we want to keep him in power because he's easy to kill later on? Or is the setup trying to ever get close to him? Japanese tales, of course, that's very common. If anyone watched Hero, the king sits back and no one's allowed to get within 100 paces of them. The challenge is breaking that distance so you can get and deliver the one strike that will kill him. Or again, the opposite side is, he's readily available. You can kill him anytime you want. But do you get more influence out of manipulation from out of knowing that you can usurp and change his power anytime you want? Glass Kings, big fan of them. One of the things, of course, you've heard me say this over and over again, I like manipulating people by their emotions. I like giving people enjoying opportunities through manipulating them into having fun. When you get into manipulating your players into having fun, you start noticing trends on the way people act. And one of those things is gender roles play an interesting aspect. If you make your villain a kind-hearted old woman, your grandmother who bakes cookies, yes, she might be off with your head type person. She might be conquering all of the land, the big bad, but when you meet her, she is the sweetest, nicest old lady. Immediately your players are going to be with, and that works really good if you built her up as, you've seen her minions do all these actions. She's the king that you've got to slay to stop. Everyone bends knee to her. They meet her, and she is the kindest, sweetest old woman, and they have to choose whether they're going to lop this woman's head off. And you get moral conflict. You get that we have to stop her. We built up a plot. We have to stop her. And if we do it, we're all going to feel like really bad people for doing it. The old woman. One of the other great things to do is humanizing your villain. This works the same way. I did this tale, and my players hated and loved it simultaneously. They hated me in character, loved me out of character for doing this, and that was when they found where the big bad was staying, the mayor of this town. They bust into his house. They were going to kill him. They bust through the front door, and they find his wife and child. Villains can be married. Villains can love people. Villains can have kids. You're making a PC with different motivations. Understand that. It immediately humanized them. It was this is no longer a demon spawn that is going to ruin everything. Here's someone with a family that doesn't fit into our mental picture of what we've established a villain to be. All of the same conflict is still there, but now we realize he's a person. And again, wonderful little plays on manipulation, humanizing them. Another good example is sort of to that degree, the good guys making the bad choice. And this was another one that I ran that really got interesting results. It was about the third story arc in the session that they met these people that were fighting on their side, sort of got into their encampment, started going through everything. And these were the group that was actually being able to fight back against the big villain of the world. And what then they found out was they had imprisoned this spirit and had it chained up inside this giant tree and were essentially bleeding it for power. And we have another conflict. We have characters that are doing ideologically the same thing as the PCs, but doing it in means that the PCs find objectionable. For all of our Game of Thrones friends out there, Daenerys Targaryen, she has a slave army. Yeah, they might be free, supposedly. I'm not a fan of the character. But if we take that character and said that she just legitimately bought a slave army and is treating them as a slave army, that's a villain. That is absolutely a villain of a story. And Tywin Lannister is the hero of that story, by the way. But good people doing good things through bad action, that's a villain. That's an antagonist. That's someone that has conflicting needs with the players. Another great one is what I call the beloved politician. Again, you notice I like making my villains very much a likable stand-up gentleman. But the beloved politician is one that is legitimately doing very bad things. They are, the cultists. They're trying to summon Cthulhu. They're killing people, in mass. But the public doesn't see it. The public loves this person, thinks they're great, and the PCs are the ones that understand he's actually a villain. And that puts the PCs not only in conflict with the villain himself, but in conflict with everyone around, because now they're having to either fight everyone or do everything in secret. And they understand that ultimately when they bring this guy down, there's going to be chaos and they're going to be hated for it. The beloved politician, they're doing the right thing but have to make the difficult choice because they're not going to get a parade in the streets. They're going to get run out of town with pitchforks for doing it, but it's the right thing. Love the beloved politician. A couple of really interesting ones, and we'll just take a question or two and sort of be at the end here. The willing martyr. This is a really interesting one. It is the villain who wants to die for his cause and makes it publicly known. A lot of times this works better with sort of, when we have levels of tiers villains. You have the real big bad that in 4 campaigns we'll get to, but this is one of his generals and we're out fighting. And all he wants to do is he wants to die to further the cause. And perhaps, especially in the world of magic, there's a magical reason that this will help. This gives them we can kill him, but he's going to be happy about dying and it's going to further their cause. The willing martyr, the villain that wants to die and publicly makes it known he wants to die for his cause. Because then you get into what's the proper way to bring this person down. Love the willing martyr. Finally, another one that I really, really like, what I call the life-linked villain. A life-linked villain is through magical spell or whatever is appropriate for your system, they directly link themselves with one of the party members. And if that party member dies, the villain dies. If the villain dies, that party member dies. And what this wonderful little ball of fun does is make the characters then have to decide We could kill him right now, but PC's dead. Likewise, the villain then looks out for the party group, because if the character dies, then he dies, and he doesn't actually want to die. He's doing this to save his own skin. I used this once. It was a phenomenal campaign. Players absolutely loved it. It actually ended up, the lifelink villain was a long-standing thing, but it gives them they have to find a way to break the spell first. And in the meantime, we have a big codependence between each other from this villain that we hate, but we can't stop him without him dying. Likewise, the villain can't kill us or else he'll die. Love that one. So we are just about out of time. I will go ahead and take. Did someone have any question that they would like to propose? Of course, about villains, about plots, about everything of the sort.
Oh, I have to echo what you
Okay,
said.
I guess I explained.
It is very important to
Sorry,
build.
Renegade, yeah, you had a question.
Yes, yes. No, I just was going to echo what you said. I agree with what you said about it is very important to build your own villain as if you wanted to play him, and that means sitting down and making their character sheet, thinking about their motivation, and also one of the things that I like to do when I make my villains is villains. I think they're supposed to be like surprising to the PCs. So when I make them, I usually create some custom either spells or force ability or something else to add it to their character sheet, so that when they meet this person, they're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Like, that's not even in the rule book. And that adds a little bit of extra, well, he's strange and something mysterious to him.
Wonderful point, and we will do a workshop specifically on mechanics, but I agree with that completely, and that's something I like to do as well. I never like to have a villain, especially a final boss, be a straight mechanics from the book, because that's what you said. If they already know what's coming, it's not a lot of fun. But we are at the conclusion here, so with the thing I'd just like to say, build your villains, build them very well. Your characters will hate them. It'll drive them to the finales, and if you give them finales, you will have lifelong players. This has been the conclusion, of course, of our fifth workshop here. By all means, of course, check out all the wonderful stuff we're doing here on Roll20. Check out our Twitter, check out our Facebook, check out the other GM Academy videos, our Monday coffee shops, and a lot of other exciting products that are up and coming. Of course, this video will be up on our YouTube channel, and for those watching it, we encourage you, like I said, watch our other videos, a lot of good information. It's been wonderful. You all have a good one. I'll see you all at the table.